Three, two, one. Hello, and welcome back to episode 3 of the Extra Points podcast. I'm your host once again, Peyton Herman, coming back to you after a new and once again exciting week of college football. There's a lot of stuff we have to go over today, such as FSU's struggles against Pitt, Penn State playing Michigan this upcoming week, and the Oklahoma Sooners and Oklahoma State Cowboys playing their final rivalry game against each other. Before we start, though, I would like to give a quick shout out to our History Club. They're hosting a clothing drive starting tomorrow for children who are less unfortunate. So if you have any children's clothes, it could be anything. It could be shirts, shoes, socks, underwear, whatever you may have. Bring it to our school. Our president, Michaela Ayers, will gladly collect it, fold it, and send it out to a shelter to those in need. So let's get right into it. We're first going to begin with my Florida State Seminoles and their, I wouldn't say embarrassing performance against Pitt, but severely underwhelming performance against the Pittsburgh Panthers. Now, Pittsburgh Panthers are having a really bad season when it comes to losing almost everybody in the draft. I imagine they lost Kenny Pickett not too long ago. He's playing with the Pittsburgh Steelers as of right now. I know they had a lot of NFL talent in the past, which sadly moved on from the Pittsburgh Panthers. So they're not having the greatest season. I'm pretty sure they're 2-8 as of right now. I know there's a lot of controversy going on with the coach. So Florida State going into Pitt should have been more of a blowout than it should have. The 2 touchdowns that the Seminoles scored, one of them was off of busted coverage, confusion on the defense, and the other one was Trey Benson coming off of a big run, which was his only big run of the game. I'm pretty sure he got 50. Yeah, on my stats here, it says he gained 55 of his 97 yards off of one TD run. So the Pittsburgh Panthers were able to stop what is basically Florida State's identity this week. Now, granted, they were missing their 3-star wide receivers and Johnny Wilson, Hakeem Williams, and Keon Coleman due to undisclosed injuries, which I personally think they were just sitting them out for this week. So the Pittsburgh Panthers were able to shut down that run game, which ultimately led to Jordan Travis looking very uncomfortable in the pocket. He did not perform to what his usual status may be, his Heisman candidate status. If you were able to watch the game, you could see he was throwing some pretty inconsistent balls. The Florida State offense looked absolutely abysmal. The run game was definitely not there. So props to the Pittsburgh team to be able to stop this explosive Florida State offense. Now, I want to talk about how FSU lost their 30 points per game streak, which spanned into last year's season with 14 games. Now, this was leading the FBS in 30 points per game, and their offense was leading that. So it's definitely, as a fan watching, it's very unfortunate. I try to show no bias towards this team. I know their weak spots. It's definitely in coverage. So it's kind of tough seeing that, and FSU relying on that run game may come back at them when it comes time to, let's say, playoffs. They're going to need Keon Coleman and Johnny Wilson and Hakeem Williams all to help complement that run game, because Trey Benson has not been it for the Seminoles. And coming up with Miami this next week, it's definitely going to be rough, because rivalry games in college football are something different. It's something you don't see in the NFL. I mean, you have your Eagles, Cowboys, and Steelers, Bengals. But in my humble opinion, I don't think that neither of those games come relatively close to a Florida State Miami game, or a Florida Georgia game, or even a Auburn Alabama game in the Iron Bowl. You're just not going to get something like that anywhere else. And I'm pretty sure Miami leads the series as of right now, because they went on a win streak during Florida State's tenure as being a below-average team with Willie Taggart and Mike Norvell's first 2 years. So it's a historic rivalry that should produce some good football. Tyler Van Dyke has played absolutely horrible I'm pretty sure I just saw in the news where Miami will be working with two different quarterbacks this week. Tyler Van Dyke has, I'm pretty sure he was named the starter, but his job is definitely on the line after throwing 3 interceptions last game. So we'll see what happens there. I imagine Florida State's going to pull through. They're at Tallahassee this year. It's going to be tough for this Miami team who has been struggling all season to go into Tallahassee and beat the Seminoles just because of Johnny Wilson returning, Keon Coleman returning, Hakeem Williams returning, and some adjustments in this week to the run game and the blocking scheme. So it's going to be tough, but if Benson is able to perform and help spread out this offense or tighten the defense, keep them honest, I think Florida State is going to have a good shot at beating them. But they're going to need to fix this run game and fix this offense if they want any sort of chance to have a decent college football playoff run. And speaking of college football playoff runs, Notre Dame's just came to an end this past weekend. Now, I know I have one Notre Dame fan out there. His name's Connor Peterball. I feel very sorry for him. Watching that Clemson Notre Dame game, Clemson did not score hardly any points in the second half. It was mostly the first half where Sam Hartman had 2 picks, throwing under 50% and no TDs in the air. He had 1 rushing touchdown, I believe, but that's about it. And I said this before, and I'll say it again. Clemson is one of the toughest teams to beat at home, and this game definitely proved it. Clemson has seen its struggles all season. Not really on defense. Their defense is still one of the top in the league, but their offense has definitely struggled. But they were able to stop this tough Notre Dame team who has shown its strength against teams like Ohio State and such. But Notre Dame's offense did not want to show up to the second half. Like I said before, this is when Hartman had his rushing TD along with their running back who had 17 carries and a touchdown. Now, that isn't going to cut it if you want to beat teams like Clemson at home with a very, very tough defense and a very tough crowd to play against. So, and this is Notre Dame's 3rd loss, I believe, of the season. So, this takes them out. Oh, Mitchell has it pulled up. Notre Dame is now 7-3, ranked 22. Clemson Tigers 5-4. Both Notre Dame 6-2 coming into the game. Clemson Tigers 4-4 coming into the game. So it's definitely tough for the Irish to come back from this. Their season is not over. They could definitely make a New Year's Six Bowl if they win out. They definitely have to win out if they want any chance. And they're going to have some sort of miracle to get into the college football playoffs. Like, everybody has to lose. Everybody has to lose. Georgia, I almost said Miami. Georgia, Michigan, they're all going to have to lose at least 2 games before they even get a chance, and that's a very, very slim chance. So, the season's not over, like I said, but this win gives Clemson some huge, huge momentum coming into next week. I didn't see who they played next week, but I imagine they played Georgia Tech next week. Mitchell has it pulled up for me. So Georgia Tech. What's that? That's Notre Dame. Yeah, Clemson. They play Georgia Tech next week, who has been on fire as of recently, beating Miami in the final minutes or final seconds of that game. Should have taken the kneel. Taking another team in double overtime. I can't remember exactly who they played, where they took in the double overtime. But Georgia Tech's a tough team. But once again, they play Clemson at home. So
the double overtime was Miami.
Double overtime Miami?
Yep.
Oh yeah, that's right. So Miami, beating Miami, double overtime. It's tough. But I believe Clemson's still going to pull through. They have a lot of momentum coming into this game after beating Notre Dame. So, speaking of the Miami Hurricanes, they play Florida State next week, or this coming week. But their offense has been absolutely mediocre. Mediocre is the word to describe how this Miami Hurricanes has looked. Tyler Van Dyke, or TVD as I will abbreviate his name, has not been it for the Hurricanes. He has underperformed. I'm pretty sure in the last few games he has had 7 turnovers of just him alone, with 3 coming from this game against NC State. Now, NC State is a very tough team. They always play to their opponent. I've seen it last year against Clemson. They beat Clemson on a scored 2-point or a touchdown, I believe, off of a pass from not DJ Ugalele, from the quarterback, obviously. So in the loss against NC State, TVD threw 21 for 38, 170 yards with 3 interceptions. And I mentioned before how Miami is working 2 quarterbacks this week. Mario Cristobal has not named a starter for the Hurricanes. It could be problematic for the Florida State Seminoles, but it could also be kind of a gift. Miami is working a more run fit quarterback rather than a pocket passer. So this could be problematic for the Seminoles, as they have struggled against teams who have been more of a scrambling type of offense rather than a pocket passing type of offense. So it's like I said before, it's going to be a good matchup. Florida State versus Miami is a classic rivalry. It's been classic since the dawn of college football. Miami, Florida State is going to be tough, but FSU is expected to bring back 3 wide receivers that were missing in the 24-6 win over Pittsburgh. So, that's about it. I don't think that the Hurricanes can get it done. They have had a disappointing season so far in terms of offense. They can't even name a starting quarterback, which is kind of rough coming into week 10 of the season, I believe. Week 10. Mitchell's looking at me real quick. So, yeah, coming into week 10 and not being able to name a starting quarterback, who Tyler Van Dyke has been the starter for the past year or so, and he's been benched a few times before, and he was dealing with injury, I believe. So it's kind of heartbreaking thinking of it, putting myself in a Miami fan's shoes, but, go Noles. And now on to SEC, my favorite, or not my favorite conference, but definitely one of the most exciting conferences this week. The Tide continued to roll in the 42-28 win against the LSU Tigers. Now, I don't know if some of you watched the Heisman odds, but Jaden Daniels is one of the top Heisman candidates of the year. But against these tough teams like Florida State and Alabama, he seemed to have shut down, because Brian Kelly's offense revolves around scrambling and options and sort of things like that. But if you're able to shut that down, then you'll be all right. But what I really want to talk about is Jalen Milroe and his performance against this team. So I've stated this before. Ever since his benching against the Texas game, he has turned the Jets on. He is on fire ever since being benched for the backup quarterback. In the air was not his best game. It was still a decent game. I want to put that out there right now. It was still a very, very, very good game in the air and on the ground. So in the air, he went 15 for 23 with 219 yards, but no touchdowns. Now you're probably thinking, no touchdowns? How is this a good game? What did he do? He had 4 touchdowns on the ground and was the team's leading rusher. 4 touchdowns on the ground against a top LSU team. Now, granted, their defense definitely isn't the best in the league, but scoring 4 rushing touchdowns as a quarterback in college football is definitely something that NFL scouts are going to be looking at. And this guy only had 20 carries, and he produced 4 touchdowns off of them for 155 yards. A quarterback being your team's leading rusher is something that doesn't happen often. And the way that Jalen Milroe has progressed this season is absolutely phenomenal. So in this game, Milroe was averaging 8 yards per carry in a first down every single throw. I don't know what people are thinking, but my personal hot take, these are Heisman finalist level stats. This game not only boosted his Heisman stock, but boosted his draft stock as well. Alabama, their schedule is relatively easy in terms of future games. I don't think they have the toughest schedule going into these last few weeks into the SEC championship games, but I definitely think that they will be the shoo-in. Mitchell's having it pulled up for me real quick. So their next game is against Kentucky, which is having sort of a rough season, but it's still going to be tough. It's at Kentucky, so they just recently lost to Tennessee. I believe it was the week before. But they put up a good fight. So this Kentucky team will definitely be able to prove their own against a tough Alabama team. But then they play Chattanooga, which they probably paid them a couple $1 million to play. And their last game is Auburn in the Iron Bowl. Now, every college football fan should know about the kick six. Davis, Alabama decided to go for a field goal rather a QB kneel to send it into overtime. So Alabama kicked the field goal. Chris Davis ran up the left side of the sideline, sent Auburn to the national championship. That was one of the greatest rivalry moments in college football, hands down. And not only that, Auburn beat Alabama a few years ago at Auburn in the Iron Bowl. So it may seem like Auburn is not a great team, but when it comes to playing Alabama, they are a legit upset team. I would compare them to even Purdue. Purdue has shown their own against teams like Ohio State and Iowa, when Iowa was ranked number 2 a few seasons ago, which was absolutely insane. Never thought I would see that in my life. But the Iron Bowl is always a classic, and anything happens in a rivalry game. Anyone can win any given week in college football. It's not like the NFL as much, where you can sort of predict which team's going to win, which team's going to not. When it comes to games like this, it's really tough because the teams know that they have nothing to lose at this point. It's a rivalry game. Everyone's hyped. Everyone's ready to go. And they're going to have to beat the Auburn Tigers if they want a chance at the SEC championship game. Now, they are the shoe-in, I believe, as of right now. They have only one loss, and it's coming to the Longhorns, and are undefeated in conference play so far. And if they continue to win out like they have to, they not only have a chance at the SEC championship game, they have a chance at the college football playoff, in my opinion. Now, it's not as long as a long shot as Notre Dame. Notre Dame's hopes are still diminished, but definitely Alabama has a much better shot at making the top 4 and reaching the playoffs. Now, granted, will they make it past the first round? It depends. It depends how Jalen Milroe progresses. If he continues his Heisman level season. But that's what it's going to take if they want to get anywhere near that sort of championship level, where they will have to face the Georgia Bulldogs, who are on pace for a 3-peat season. The Bulldogs are easily the most dominant team in the league right now. Granted, they don't have the best resume like Ohio State, but each week that resume gets worse and worse. Beating Penn State was a given. Penn State, I just saw this stat. They are ranked 121st in passing yards per throw. 121st in passing yards per throw, and you want to go out there and beat Ohio State. That is not going to happen, and it's never going to happen unless you figure something out on offense. The Penn State Nittany Lions are a severely underperforming team, which will continue to underperform every single year under James Franklin due to his incapability of winning these big games. I will continue to say it, and I'll continue to say it until something is changed. Now, granted, Ohio State is a very, very, very tough team, and it will continue to be a tough team with Marvin Harrison and Kyle McCord having a very, very good game. But they are not as dominant as the Georgia Bulldogs. Hot take, neither are the Michigan Wolverines. The Michigan Wolverines have played no one to, or they're going to play Penn State this week. They're going to play nobody to their competition. They have all played a bunch of nobodies, really. The Wolverines haven't played anyone significant this season so far, and it's week 10. I mean, J.J. McCarthy is putting up some amazing stats, having a Heisman season, and Blake Corum is an amazing, phenomenal NFL talent. But it's still not as good as the Georgia Bulldogs. Now, granted, Bulldogs are number 2 in the nation, I believe, as of right now. College football. It recently switched from the AP poll. So the AP poll is from the first few weeks of college football, where they release every Sunday at 2 p.m. Now we've started the college football playoff rankings, which go until the last week of the season, which come out every Tuesday at 7 p.m. with a college football playoff ranking committee. I mean, there's an AP poll ranking committee, but with college football playoff, it's a lot different because there's a lot more factors that go into it. So Georgia has faced one of the toughest teams in the SEC with Missouri this week. They're the most dominant team in the nation. In my humble opinion, I don't believe it's Ohio State or Michigan. The Bulldogs are on pace to complete their three-peat. They forced Missouri, which is one of the toughest trios on offense, with wide receiver Luther Burden III, QB Brady Cook, and running back Cody Schrader. This cemented the Bulldogs as the greatest defense in college. Now, I say this because Missouri has one of the most explosive offenses in the league in the NCAA, with Luther Burden III, Brady Cook, and Cody Schrader, who have all been having amazing seasons and are turning around this Missouri program, who has not been good in the past few years. They are revamping this program and putting it back on the rise. Now, losing to Georgia is definitely tough, but they held their own for the longest time, and props to this Missouri team. And I say it every single week. It's fun to watch. It's fun to watch this team putting up a fight against teams like LSU and teams like Georgia, who they go in there with severe underdogs. But Cody Schrader, the Bulldogs defense held Cody Schrader to 22 carries, 110 yards, and 1 touchdown. Now, with someone as explosive as him, I'm not exactly sure what he was averaging before this game, but it's still impressive what this Georgia team has been doing. Now, beginning of this season, nobody put them as number 1. Georgia, the Bulldogs definitely did not play to their capabilities. They struggled against teams that they should have beat by triple digits, even being dramatic. They should have beat a few teams by triple digits. But it was the start of the season, and everyone says, "Oh, don't make excuses for this team. They should have been so much better." But it was the start of the season. They lost one of their starting quarterbacks, or they lost the starting quarterback in Stetson Bennett to the NFL draft. So it definitely took some adjustments, getting used to everything. The offense did not look to their capabilities, but now they definitely look a lot better. They're able to match this defense. So this is what a national championship team should look like. Perfect, or I want to say perfect because nothing's perfect. An all-around solid team. And even with Brock Bowers out, this team still looks amazing. Brock Bowers is, if you don't know, one of the best tight ends in college football as of right now, but he got injured a few weeks ago. He was out 4 to 6 weeks, so he should be back around the time of the SEC championship game, or at worst, the college football playoff. But the Georgia offense still has looked absolutely amazing. And to complement that, the defense held Brady Cook to one of his worst games, throwing for under 50% completion and forcing 2 interceptions. Now, if you're unaware, this is very, very unfamiliar with Brady Cook, as he has not done something like this all season. But that's the thing about this defense, is defense wins you championships if the Georgia offense is able to complement it, because they're able to force these turnovers. Georgia's able to score, and the cycle continues. So being able to create these turnovers is one big factor on how you can determine if a team's good or not. If the defense is able to force and recover fumbles, get these sacks, fourth down stops, even interceptions that could go for 6. That's how you determine whether a team is elite or not. If your team's able to force these turnovers, then this shows that they are a national championship team, and they held one of the best quarterbacks in the nation right now, Brady Cook, to 2 interceptions and under 50%. So it's props to the Georgia defense. Props to the Georgia defense is all I have to say, because they've come a long, long way since the beginning of the season. And they held Luther Burden, who has been a star for this Missouri Tigers team all season, to only 3 receptions. 3 receptions. This is being dramatic, but it's like taking Marvin Harrison out of the game entirely. They held him 3 receptions and only 53 yards. Now, to me, looking at these stats every week in, week out, it's definitely impressive to see something like this, because I've covered Missouri a couple times in these past few weeks as they have played teams that I've wanted to cover, such as Georgia and other teams. I just want to give props to the Georgia defense and the Georgia offense for being able to develop this way. I would compare it to Alabama. Some Alabama and Georgia fans out there might hate me for that. But you can see the progress throughout the season, and that's how the way it should go if you want to be a good team. If your team doesn't progress, then it's not going to be good. And they have gotten better week in and week out, and so has Alabama. So what I think is going to be an amazing SEC championship game with huge college football playoff implications, it's going to be Georgia and Alabama. Now, granted, Georgia's schedule is way tougher than Alabama's last few weeks stretch. So I have written down Georgia has 2 ranked opponents to play in Ole Miss this week and Tennessee the week after that. But still, they play an unranked but proven Georgia Tech team. Now, this is one of the most one-sided rivalries in college football, with Georgia leading heavily. But the 2 games I really want to talk about are Ole Miss and Tennessee. So Ole Miss is coming off of a scare, as some may say, against the Texas A&M. It's hard to describe a game like this just by stats, so I'm not going to look at it from a stat, or I'm going to look at it from a stat standpoint, but not as much as I usually do. And it's just what you have in this game is exciting in-conference football. The Ole Miss Rebels have been red hot with one of the best QB rooms in the nation. They got multiple transfers in the portal with Jackson Dart. And the Ole Miss Rebels just are absolutely red hot right now. The Jimbo Fisher-led A&M Aggies have had a severely underwhelming past couple seasons, losing to teams which they should have dominated, in my opinion. But coming out with a 3-point win against Texas A&M is something that the Ole Miss Rebels should definitely be afraid of. Whether it's their defense letting up these points or their offense not playing to their capabilities, which I think it's more the defense not playing to their capabilities. But looking at what ESPN has on the game, Keyshawn Judkins was a difference maker in the game. Judkins only had 102 yards on 23 carries, but in those, he scored 3 touchdowns. The final score ended up being 38-35, with Jackson Dart throwing for 2 touchdowns, going 24 for 33, and 387 yards. So without those 3, now it's going to sound silly, but without those 3 touchdowns, Ole Miss would not have a chance. And one of those touchdowns being the go-ahead touchdown with 1:40 to play left in the game. So it's definitely a difference maker if your team is able to run the ball. If you're a defense and you see a team that only passes the ball and not have to worry about the run, it's going to be an easy week for you. To have a competent offense, you need both run and pass game. Without that, your offense will be nothing. Well, not necessarily nothing unless you have some stud at quarterback and wide receiver. But if you want to win these close games like this, like games that come down to the wire, with the 38-35 win, you want that sort of offense where you're able to get these sort of clutch plays. And Jackson Dart had 387 yards, but 213 of these yards and a touchdown went to wide receiver Trey Harris. So it's not only just the run game that they're able. Well, excuse me. Let me backtrack. It's the run game that opens up these sort of plays and gets these 213 yards to that one receiver and a touchdown, which ultimately boosts Ole Miss to their winning position. Now, credit to the A&M offense as Max Johnson, also threw for 300 yards and went 31 for 42 in the air. But overall, I want to say this was a great game for both teams. This is what college football is about. Games like this. You're not going to get any sort of game like this in the NFL with this sort of atmosphere, with this sort of crowd, with the band and everything all like that. And it's just why I love covering the sport, is just games like this. It's nothing you can see anywhere else, in my humble opinion. Maybe somewhere in Europe with soccer, but that's just all I really want to say about these two teams. Props to them. Now, Ole Miss is still in a tough spot even after the win. The Rebels are 8-1, but that one loss is coming to undefeated in conference Alabama, which cripples the chances of Ole Miss making the SEC chip. So what they're going to have to do, Alabama is going to have to lose against, does Alabama play any more SEC teams, Mitch? Let me see real quick. So they're going to have to lose against Auburn. So I know, as I said before, it's going to be a tall task for the Auburn Tigers to beat the Alabama Crimson Tide. But like I said, anything happens in a rivalry game. So Ole Miss Rebels are definitely going to have to bank on it. I imagine they're still going to get it. Alabama's still going to get in because they do have that win over Ole Miss. So this puts them ahead already, even if Alabama loses. So the way it would work, Alabama would have to lose to Kentucky and Auburn for Ole Miss to get a shot, which would put them at what's their record in conference, Mitch? I'm pretty sure it's 8-1. 8-1. I know that's the regular schedule. That's the regular schedule. Yeah, but anyways, Alabama's got to lose to two SEC teams, which I don't think will happen. I don't think the Crimson Tide would let that happen. So it's going to be a long shot for the Ole Miss Rebels, but they're definitely going to make some sort of New Year's Six. I want to say props to them because Lane Kiffin is having an amazing season, an amazing past few seasons, bringing the Ole Miss Rebels back to relevance. Because if some of you may not know, Ole Miss was irrelevant the past few years. So it's good seeing a team like that, and especially fun to watch Lane as their head coach. He's a very, very charismatic head coach. I'd say he's one of the Mike Leaches of college football. He's just an amazing guy to watch. He's just very energetic, cares about his players, cares about his team. So, like I said, they still have a shot. They need a few lucky wins or losses, but that's about it in my opinion. So it's going to be tough. But now on to everybody's favorite, at least in this area, the Big Ten. So I talked about this before, how Ohio State is a dominant team, but they're only a dominant team in the second half. Going into this game against Rutgers and the Scarlet Knights, there we go. I had to get some water. Going into this game, we all thought it was going to be a blowout. Ohio State was going to go in there, win by at least 17 points, in my opinion. It was 9-7 at half. It was 9-7 at half, and Rutgers was able to score off of a fake tush push, which led to a field goal and put them up 9-7 or not a fake field goal, a fake tush push, which eventually led them to a field goal, which put them up 9-7 against the Buckeyes. Now, this was something that we were not expecting whatsoever. Kyle McCord seemed to bounce back in the second half. McCord only threw for one touchdown and an interception in the first quarter. in the first half is what it should say, which proved to be the only points scored in the first half for the Buckeyes. So the Buckeyes only scored a touchdown against a team that they should have absolutely dominated. Should have dominated. McCord finished the game with 3 touchdowns, 189 yards, and completed 19 of his 26 pass attempts. So looking at this, you can tell that I don't know what Ryan Day said to them in the locker room, but it's definitely something that I think every team should listen to if they're getting dominated by a team, or not want to say dominated, but playing down to their opponents. Whatever Ryan Day said to them, I think all teams should listen, because Ohio State came out there on fire. They allowed only, 6 more points? Mitchell's checking for me real quick. 7 more points, 7 more points in the second half. So only allowing 1 more touchdown. So what I really want to get at here is Ohio State cannot be playing like a second half team if they want to be national championship level. If they want to be a national champion, they are going to have to be a 4 quarters team. They're not going to be able to play against teams like Georgia or Michigan or, hot take, Florida State. With all these explosive offenses, they're not going to be able to keep up with it. The Ohio State defense is going to get worn out, and the offense needs to score in the first half. So another thing people say is how dominant that their resume is. The resume has been getting worse and worse each week. It's becoming less and less of an impressive win, with Notre Dame losing to Clemson, unranked Clemson, who has struggled, as I've said before, and Penn State, who has not played anyone significant since the Buckeyes. Now, granted, they're playing Wolverines this week, but it's just not a dominant win. And they even struggled against Penn State going into the half. I'm pretty sure it was 6-10, I believe, against the team. Penn State's. It's a rivalry game, like I said, so it's tough, but they still should have beat that team by a lot more. So they are most likely going to the playoffs. Will they win first round? More than likely, but as I said, they are not a national championship winning team. So that's all I have to say about them. They need to fix their first half mistakes. First half lulls, in my opinion. And Marvin Harrison was shut down. He wasn't the team's leading receiver, but he scored 2 touchdowns. McCord threw in the second half. So I want to backtrack. I want to take back what I said a little bit. Marvin Harrison was not the leading receiver, but he still scored 2 touchdowns. So they need to get him in the game as much as they do before. I know I wasn't able to watch this game, but I don't know how Marvin Harrison looked in the first half. But if he was not as dominant as he was in the first half, the Ohio State offense is not going to be what they are. So this is why I'm saying they need to figure out how they get the ball to Marvin Harrison more than anyone else, because Marvin Harrison is definitely their playmaker and their leading scorer. It's what he does, and it's what he does best. So I want to backtrack one more time. Speaking of Penn State and the Wolverines, Penn State had a rebound game this past week against a below-average Maryland team. Drew Aller, however you pronounce it. People have told me different. Went 25 for 34 with 240 yards and 4 touchdowns. Penn State was easily able to regain some confidence after having 2 tough weeks underperforming. But here comes the real challenge. The Michigan. Let me go back a little bit. Neither Penn State or Michigan, besides Ohio State, Penn State playing Ohio State, have played anyone up to their sort of league. Penn State Michigan will be an evenly matched game. My hot take, just because of the team schedules and how the teams have played. Michigan has been dominant in the games they played, but they haven't played anyone really severely important. Mitch has it pulled up for me. They played East Carolina, UNLV, Bowling Green, Rutgers, who is a decent team this year, I will give them that. Nebraska, Minnesota, Indiana, Michigan State, and Purdue. So if anyone wants to comment on this, you all can look at that schedule and tell me what team would give Michigan the best fight. I want to know. I really want to know. What win is impressive there? Rutgers? Nebraska? Michigan State? I mean, the end of the season is definitely really tough for Ohio State, as next week or this coming week they play Penn State. The following week they play Maryland, who has underperformed. But then the last week of the game they have the game in Ohio State. So I want to say it's even, but I still think Penn State is going to lose just because of how James Franklin plays in big games like this. J.J. McCarthy is definitely going to be challenged for the first time. He's having a Heisman-level season. He has 2,134 yards, 18 touchdowns, 3 interceptions, while maintaining a 75% completion rating. But I want to go back to 2019 when Penn State played Michigan at Beaver Stadium. I don't know if you saw the clip, the Mobamba clip, where the Penn State DJ played Mobamba, and it got so loud in the stadium on the first play of the game. Now, this was after kickoff. First play of the game, Michigan already had to call timeout. And Michigan ended up losing that game. And Mr. Fox, who was on the last show, was telling me how he was at that game because he was in the blue band. I don't know if you mentioned that. He was in the blue band. He was at that game, and he told me you could even hear the person next to you. So Penn State fans, win or lose, will show out for their team. And they are a crazy fan base. One of the loudest fan bases I've ever been a part of, as I went to a few Penn State games in the past. They are one of the loudest fans in the nation. And this is where I think Michigan will struggle, as they have not played a crowd like this. So I think it's going to be close. It's going to be a closer game than people will think. But I still think Michigan's going to pull it off. And even with this controversy going on and everything with Michigan, I still think they're a good team. I still think they can do it, but it's going to be very, very, very tough because Penn State is a tough team at home, tough team to beat at home. But Michigan is a better team. Michigan overall is a better team. And I mentioned this before in the beginning of the podcast. The final meeting between Oklahoma State and Oklahoma. Now, this is, I know I said it before, this is one I am not going to look at from a stats perspective, more of a reminiscing perspective, more as a, like, dang, this is over. This is the last time that these two will ever meet. Oklahoma State, Oklahoma. Now, it is a one-sided rivalry, but in these past few seasons, it has been won by Oklahoma State. I'm more than certain. No, Mitchell waved me off. I thought he was going to look it up. But Oklahoma State won against Oklahoma 27-24. And this game was a huge game. I keep saying it. It was the last game of the season. Oklahoma State has done an amazing job turning around the program. That has been irrelevant for the past years, and this game proved it. In the final minutes of the game, the Oklahoma Sooners fumbled. They fumbled. And the Cowboys recovered, which led them to scoring a game-deciding field goal to win 27-24. And what's very, very special about this is that Oklahoma recently signed a deal with the SEC along with the Texas Longhorns to move to that conference. So there's, if you haven't been keeping up, there's huge conference realignment going on in college football. Florida State's looking at going to the SEC along with Clemson. Oklahoma, Texas have already submitted and they're going to head over there soon. And the Pac-12 is being demolished at this point. There's only going to be, pretty sure it's Washington State and Oregon State are going to be the last two teams after this conference realignment. So this will be the last chance, the last laugh for Oklahoma State. Not only did they beat OU, they got rid of any sort of playoff chance that the Oklahoma Sooners had. And it's rivalries like this, like I said before, why I love college football. Because even though Oklahoma has dominated against OSU in the past. If you look at the record, it's completely lopsided. I'm pretty sure it's like 100-1 or something. I'm being dramatic. But OU not only beat them in their last chance, or excuse me, not Oklahoma not only got rid of their playoff hopes. That's something Oklahoma will get back eventually. Like whether it's 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 years down the road, they're going to be able to get to back to the college football playoffs eventually just because of that historic program. They're never going to play Oklahoma State again. They're never going to play this team again. So, in my opinion, Oklahoma State has the last laugh. They took out Oklahoma's playoff opportunities and beat them in their last matchup. So, overall, I think it was a very, very fun game. It's something why I love college football so much. It's why I love covering it. It's great to watch things like this happen. It's just so fun. It's definitely heartbreaking for the teams, but as a fan and as a commentator myself, I love it. And it's something that you can't find anywhere else in this sport. It's so amazing. It's kind of like a story. One team wins, one team loses, and it's just great to watch as a fan. So on to my predictions for this week. Last week going 5-4, definitely not my best week. My worst one being Army versus Air Force. Air Force absolutely did not perform. Triple option did not work that last week. So FSU versus Miami. Historic rivalry. FSU by 14. Easily. I think it's going to be a solid 21 Miami. Miami 21. Florida State 35. Maybe not even that. Maybe it's going to be 14-28 or maybe 14-35. It's going to be Florida State's going to dominate. Miami coming into Tallahassee. It's going to be a tough crowd. It's one of the loudest crowds in college football, one of the best atmospheres in college football, in my opinion, Florida State opinion. But so I got Florida State winning by let's go 21. Florida State 35, Miami 21 or 14. Excuse me. Alabama. Who does Alabama play again, Mitch? I don't have it written down.
I'll find that. You go on to the next word. Do you have anything else?
We'll come back to that. So Michigan versus Penn State. Michigan versus Penn State. I've covered this before. I think Michigan it's going to be a tough game going into Beaver Stadium. I have Michigan winning, but it's only going to be by 7. It's going to be 35-28 final score. Penn State will not get it done. Their defense will be able to stop the Michigan Wolverines. So, final score, Michigan 35, Penn State 28. Now back to Mitchell had it pulled up for me. So, Alabama versus Kentucky. I have Alabama winning by 17. It's going to be an easy game for the Crimson Tide. I don't know if I have a score for this game. I don't have it written down. But Kentucky, it should be a rollover. Like I said, Kentucky is a tough team. They fought their own against Tennessee, but that was a few weeks ago. I don't think they have any sort of momentum anymore. But yeah. So Georgia, my game of the week. My game of the week right here. Georgia versus Ole Miss. Like I said before, both are having some very good offenses, very, very good offenses, and Georgia has that phenomenal defense. So it's going to be like when an unstoppable force meets an immovable object. So I think Georgia's going to pull out of this. It's going to be a very, very tough game. They have a very, very tough schedule ahead of them, but this will prove that they are national championship contenders going in there and beating number 10, Ole Miss. I have Georgia by 7. By 7 once again. 24-31 Bulldogs. 31 being Georgia, of course. 24 being the Rebels. I don't think Lane Kiffin is a great coach. Jackson Dart, is a great quarterback. It's still going to be tough for them to go in there and win. So I have Georgia beating the Rebels. This concludes it for this week's podcast. I hope you all enjoyed listening. It is absolutely, I love making these. So if you have any sort of comments on what I can do, let me know. If there's any sort of games that I missed that you want me to cover, I will cover them. 2-year will. I'll cover any game. I love college football, and I will continue to make these podcasts as long as there's college football. So thank you all for listening. I hope you enjoy.